Hi, welcome to the Recovery Daily podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Miller. I'm a stroke survivor and grateful recovering alcoholic. It's always weird when I say I'm a stroke survivor. I still am not quite sure that registers with me. And that's a little bit about acceptance, and that's what I'm talking about today. It all starts with acceptance. The topic today is happiness is here and now, and accepting my disability is the only way I can begin to forge a new path. Today is my last formal day of work um, with my company, and I'll end with a little note on that today. But by by accepting this impairment that I have with my vision, it's the only way I can enjoy the new projects that I've been working on while I've been um, away from my career. And projects like this podcast, a book, that's right, a book, sewing, and all the other projects that I have waiting in line behind those. And I've got lots of them. If any of whoever knows me knows that there's always a backlog of ideas. So, um, this recovery journey, though, is not a road to happiness. And I more and more have been thinking about how I started off this podcast really talking about this journey. Thanks for being on this journey with me. And something's waiting for me. I just know it. And, and I have over the past week realized that I was looking at it all wrong, that there wasn't something waiting for me on the other side of all of this. There was something already here. It was already here. And happiness is here. And I can only feel it if I accept life on life's terms. If I focus on what needs to change outside of me instead of what needs to change within me, I can't be happy. I need to meet life right where life is, right here in the present. So I was thinking of this whole topic where yesterday I talked about what what are you willing to do to reach your goal? What are you willing to do to get sober? And it made me think, what am I willing to do to be happy? And as I was doing my research today and I was listening to different uh, YouTube videos, I ran across one that was talking about what was I willing to do for my children's happiness when they were young. My kids aren't kids anymore. My daughter is 22 and my son is going to be turning 26 at the end of November. So they're not kids anymore, but I still love to daydream and think back when they were children and how rewarding it was, how happy it made me to take care of them, and how that that feeling of helping another person is something that I find happiness in. Um, is what I was thinking of. And I thought, oh, I'm really happy that I have these two dogs. I have my Weimaraner and my bulldog, and they are just my little shadows. Like, we are constantly together, the three of us. Some days I go crazy, but most days we're just like three peas in a pod. We really are. It's almost ridiculous looking. If you imagine imagine this sleek, dark gray Weimaraner who is ready to just run like a bullet through a field. And then I've got this fat, fat, wrinkly bulldog who I can barely get to walk down the stairs to go outside and go to the bathroom. So it's the three of us together, and then there's me who's just kind of like, I have good days and bad days, but I'll tell you, these dogs just bring me so much joy. And anyway, I stray from the topic. What I was thinking about was, what was I willing to do for my kids to be happy during their childhood? And would I do the same for myself? I talk all the time about this snapshot I have of me when I was younger, when I was in elementary school. And I think of her, and I think of her, that she's still inside of me somewhere, and what am I willing to do to make her happy? And so this stuff that I talked about yesterday about self-knowledge and what are you willing to do to meet your goals, I talked about how it's important to have the answer to what are you willing to do to, let's say, get sober, so that when inevitably you're pushed up against that limit, are you willing to go further? Are you willing, or you reach your limit of what you're willing to do to get sober, and then you just quit, you quit trying. But the difference here about what are you willing to do uh, for happiness, what I learned today is that happiness is not something that's caused. Happiness is not caused by something else. That is pleasure. And so one thing that really resonated with me was a really short video on from Will Smith. And he said that happiness is peace, not pleasure. So what I was looking for, an expanded version of that, and I did find the expanded version of that interview of Will Smith, and it's really good. Um, but that was really the most profound thing that I felt like he said there in that interview. Happiness is peace and not pleasure. So I was thinking of what I can compare that to. And you all know that I've been baking, right? I've been baking and I'm making sourdough along with all kinds of other stuff. At this point, side note, I have made brown bread. I have made I was trying to think, it's not brown bread, it's not rye. I don't know. I'm having a brain blank right now. Anyway, bagels, I made pretzels, I made sandwich bread, and I made pancakes, like from scratch pancakes and all this stuff. So my point is I've got this sourdough starter, and that's what I'm using to make all of this stuff. So my sourdough starter, I hear everybody names their sourdough starter so our sourdough starter is named Ricardo Shilly Shally. And for any of you who watch Big Bang Theory, you will know who Ricardo Shilly Shally is. And if you don't, then tough luck. I feel sorry for you. But a lot of the stuff that I bake is made from from the sourdough starter discard. And so I've named the discard, which is, you guessed it, Ricardo Discardo. And I know, I think it's brilliant. So anyway, I'm thinking about this happiness is peace and not pleasure. And I thought, if I compare it to the sourdough starter and this whole sourdough experience that I'm having, the sourdough starter would be the happiness, which is peace. And the reason why is because the reason why people name these sourdough starters is because they're alive and you know, you have to feed it. And so you have to feed it at certain intervals or it will die. And depending on its environment, you need to feed it more often or less often. So if you put it in the refrigerator, you only have to feed it once a week. If you have it on the counter, you have to feed it twice a day. And this was it seemed so comparable to me to happiness and this peace. Because depending on what our environment is, we have to feed our peace and happiness at certain intervals to keep it alive. If we have a really challenging environment, then we need to feed it more often, you know? But if we've got, an environment that really doesn't test us so much, we don't have to feed it so much. It kind of lives longer without us having to constantly be feeding it. So anyway, I was thinking about that and I was thinking the sourdough loaf after you make the sourdough is pleasure. It's not alive, it's just something that comes out of it, that we get to eat and enjoy it. So I thought it was a good comparison for me to remember that happiness is peace and not pleasure. And so I was thinking about, well, if happiness is something that lives inside of me, and it's not something that is caused by something else, but yet something that just is, what is the difference between happiness and serenity? And I get a little leery about talking about these different definitions of words and play on words and all of that stuff, but I really have a passion for this idea of serenity now. And the reason why is because I remember the day that I first felt serenity. And it was after I got sober. It was after working the steps of my program where I was practicing acceptance and I was practicing sharing with others what's going on inside of me. And, all of these things that we do in our sobriety program. And I remember the first time, I've shared about it before in the podcast, where I was taking a walk outside and I remember thinking, this is it. This is what serenity feels like. And what it felt like was that there was no disturbance, none. It was like like a lake that was just like glass on top. There was no disturbance. It was just a peaceful, restful state of being. And it didn't matter where I was. It just happened to be when I was on the walk, that I reached this like aha, I'm looking inside of me and nothing is bothering me. I mean, can you imagine looking inside and for once after years of almost getting to the point where I'm slowly committing suicide by alcohol to one day be on a walk outside and there's nothing disturbing me on the inside. Now that is a life worth living for sure. So, seeking happiness externally is pleasure. And pleasure is temporary, while happiness is long lasting. And it depends on my serenity. So, how did I set myself up to feel serenity? Um, the long version is the steps of my sobriety program. The short version is broken down into three three basic ideas. One is acceptance, and acceptance. I was thinking today, acceptance has this feeling when I say it, like it means that I have to accept what's bad. Whatever's bad, I have to accept it. And that is not what acceptance means. I even wrote down on my remarkable tablet, I wrote down accepting life's struggles. And although that's true, there's a lot of acceptance that happens outside of struggles. Anyway, acceptance really means that you're changing your mindset from focusing on the pain to focusing on the lesson. That's all acceptance is. It's a change of mindset. I mean, we all know it's a change of mindset, but I always thought acceptance was like, okay, this happened. I had a stroke. I accept it. That means I can't be upset about it anymore. And that's not what it means. It means that I stop focusing on what I can't do and what pain this has caused me and start focusing on the lessons, the opportunities. That's what acceptance is. So that's number one. Number two is helping others. So this made me think about back to that what am I willing to do for myself to make me happy, uh, compared to what was I willing to do for my kids to make them happy. What am I willing to do? I still am, even though they're 22 and 20, almost 26. What am I willing to do to make them happy? The reason why I was so freaking happy when my kids were young children was because helping them, taking care of them, just like taking care of my dogs, makes me happy because giving makes me happy, because giving makes me focus outward instead of inward. So being helpful to others. And then number three, forgiveness. And in my sobriety program, there are a couple steps, quite a few, that build up to this idea of forgiveness. And when, a lot of people go through those steps and are trying to work through forgiving, they're focused on forgiving others. But I truly believe that the main person that you have to forgive, especially in sobriety, um, because that's what I'm so familiar with as far as processing those steps, is forgiving yourself. You know, why did I do all of that stuff? It's when I look back, it's humiliating. But one of the promises of the sobriety program is that we won't forget the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. And so I can only do that through acceptance and forgiveness, forgiving myself. So forgiving, just like accepting, makes always made me feel like, okay, I'm accepting that this is bad. That means I can't be upset about it anymore. Um, that's not true. And forgiveness also doesn't mean that, like, I thought forgiveness meant that you're just being like, all right, well, it happened, it's over now, let's forget about it, which is kind of what it is. But a lot of times, if I'm upset with somebody, it's because they crossed one of my boundaries. And back when I was drinking, I didn't have any formal boundaries per se. I never really thought about it, honestly. I was just living. And if somebody made me unhappy, then, well, clearly they must have crossed a boundary. I don't know what boundary it was, but that pissed me off. That was how how I was dealing with things. Um, and so I was kind of thinking about how if I'm forgiving somebody for crossing a boundary with me, does that mean that I don't have that boundary anymore? And that's not true. Forgiving somebody means that I'm freeing myself from being angry about it. And when I'm able to free myself from that anger, then that's how I was able to walk outside that day and be like, at this very moment in time, there are no disturbances, no disturbance in the force. There's no disturbances. And that's because I was able to go through that long process of forgiveness, acceptance, and trying the best I can. Once I started to let go of that stuff, being able to focus outward and help other people, which is where I am just thriving now. I'm thriving by doing this podcast. And that's why I wanted to start writing a book, because I'm like, I just I need this. I'm doing it for selfish reasons, but I know, and I'm hearing from people, more and more people are reaching out and saying, this is helping me. And so I don't want to stop because it's helping me too. It's just what I wanted it to be. So when we stop demanding what we want from others and from our environment and start accepting what we get from others and our environment, then we can start feeling serenity. And once we invite the serenity in, then happiness can come. But without feeling, without releasing myself from all that other stuff, all that stuff in my dark place that I talk about, um, you know, then it's not happiness that I feel that's temporary. It's pleasure. And that's what I was doing when I was drinking. I was just trying to feel pleasure. And if I kept drinking 24/7, which was what I did, then I was feeling pleasure 24/7. And it worked until it didn't work anymore, until I didn't feel pleasure anymore, and I only felt pain. And I can say with all my heart now that because I'm not drinking anymore, that my family is now getting the very best version of me that they've ever gotten. My friends and my family. So, what I have been learning to do is when I start this focusing outward, I'm trying to help others with my experience, strength, and hope. That's it. With my experience, strength, and hope. But once I do that, then I have to give others space to grow into whatever they want to become. It's like I can't, it's like a garden. I can't plant rosemary seeds and try to force them to grow into dill. All I can do is plant the seeds and nurture them on the only way I know how. And then I have to give them space to grow. So trying to force someone or something to be what it's not meant to be causes stress. And that stress is transferable. Think about stress is just tension that's caused by trying to move one thing in two directions. And when we practice acceptance, you're no longer trying to change something that's going in a direction that it's meant to go in. Acceptance doesn't change what you want to happen, but it changes the chance of breaking whomever or whatever that is that you need to accept. And that acceptance can lead to peace. And that is the serenity, the happiness. It's the freedom. It's the freedom from self. And I'll talk in a minute about that freedom that I realized today in an everyday thing that I do, which is taking my dogs out to go to the bathroom. I experienced something interesting and I wanted to share about it. But before I do, I've talked a lot about my stroke recovery being a journey. And so I just wanted to mention that again. it implies that I'm headed somewhere and that happiness will meet me at my destination. And my purpose, I'm realizing, is not at the end of my recovery. If in fact there is an end to my recovery, because right now I'm feeling like I'm status quo these days, unfortunately. But my purpose is already here. I'm doing it already. My happiness is here and now. So, with this kind of acceptance, I think I can start feeling serenity again. Because I have been feeling twisted up. For good reason, I've been feeling twisted up. But I'm reminded today through all of this that I need to continue to work towards acceptance, accepting that today's my last day of work. I haven't been working, so what's the difference? I haven't actually been working, but it's my professional relationship with my company is ending. Um, and once I'm able to accept that with the right mindset, then I can feel serene and I can feel happiness. All of it is happening inside of me. There's nothing happen. My environment is not changing. It's all change. What's changing is what's inside of me. And so this is what happened today. And this was like right around dinner time. So my dog Autumn, she's 3, and she likes to pretend like she needs to go outside for something. But she actually doesn't do anything. I think she wants to poo poo or potty. She doesn't do anything. She just walks out there, looks around, and and is like as happy as could be. And yet she's not doing anything. So I'm like, ugh. But so anyway, I've noticed that she kind of likes to walk over to the sidewalk by the road so that she can see all the other people passing. And that's where all the other dogs walk. So she likes to go over there and sniff where all the other dogs have been. So we walk all the way over there. And I was thinking that she would go potty over there. But she did not, because that's usually where she'll go if I walk her over there. She didn't go. So she's just like pulling. She's a puller. And she's gone through all kinds of training. We had like these police dog trainers that came to our house, and she's extremely trained. But there are times that I just like her to be a dog, and so I have her on this long leash. And when I'm not having her in training mode, she's a jackass. She just is. She's a jackass. And she very much looks like, coincidentally, the donkey on Shrek. So we call her Donkey sometimes, but mostly we call her Jackass. It's endearing. It really is. So she's pulling. She's like, she knows if I walk on one side of a tree that she needs to walk on the same side of the tree or she will get wrapped around the tree. She knows that. She's learned it. And she's purposely like walking on the opposite side of the tree. And I'm like, oh, I'm like, Autumn, come on. And so we start walking back to the house finally. I'm just like, no, Autumn, don't pull. No, Autumn, don't pull. I must have said that like 20 times. And so we're like walking back to the house, and I'm right across the road. It's like a little square cul-de-sac, not a big round one. The road just ends right in front of my house. And so we're right across the street from my house, and this young lady comes riding up like as fast as this electric scooter will go right between us and my house. And so Autumn does not like scooters, and she doesn't like motorcycles. She doesn't like any two-wheel vehicle that that has any kind of engine or I mean battery operated gas, anything that goes really fast on two wheels. She doesn't like it. She at one point ended up running in front of one and got hit by a little girl that was riding a scooter. So now she's even more hates it. Anyway, the girl like comes plowing up the street. And so she like loses her mind and like runs with all of her might and like pulls the long leash as tight as it would go. And so it like yanks me. And I have this pulled muscle in my shoulder that happened like right after I got out of the hospital. And Autumn did the same thing and pulled a muscle, and it's never healed because things like this happen. So she did it again, pulled my arm. The young lady knows that Autumn does not like it. Um, but she forgets sometimes, and she didn't know we were outside. So anyway, she was very apologetic and like killed the little battery engine as soon as she saw Autumn losing her mind. Anyway, by the time I got back in the house, I was like, oh, I took a big exhale and I just went, "Urgh," like that. That was it. And then, so I took Autumn's leash off of her and I said, Boris, it's your turn. And I warned Boris, I said, you better do something out there, Boris. You better not piss me off. So, he's like, blah, 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 blah. And he's like rolling down the stairs, ready to go outside. And anyway, so I take him out. And by that point, all of these little girls and a little boy came riding up on their little push scooters. And the older young lady does a lot of babysitting, I think, for all the little kids. So, and I love all of these kids. And so they all come riding up and they pull their scooters over and they come over and say hi to Boris. And Boris is just like all fat and wiggly and everything and panting and stuff. And so the little kids started talking to me, and I don't know, it was adorable. All the little kids like me. So they pet Boris and everything, and then they're off on their way. They all get on their scooters and they run along. And so Boris and I go over to where Autumn and I were in the grass, and Boris does his little potty. And I realize when I'm standing there waiting for him to potty, I'm I'm looking inward this whole time. I'm watching the difference between when Autumn started running on the other side of the tree from me, and how I was getting aggravated, and how all of a sudden that young lady on the scooter came riding up the road, and Autumn losing her shit on the on the she didn't do anything, she was just pulling on me. And and the difference just within minutes, this was a matter of 5 minutes probably, where then I ended up being standing there with Boris and I was smiling. On the outside, I was smiling. And I thought, isn't that interesting how I changed how I was feeling just within 5 minutes based on what was going on around me. And so when I think about this happiness and this peace versus pleasure thing, my happiness over the course of that time from when I started to take Autumn out to when I finished taking Boris out, my level of happiness didn't change. My state of mind did not change. My inner peace did not change. The only thing that changed was my environment. That was it. My whole day did not change. When Autumn did these things that she did and I got aggravated, it didn't ruin my day. I just got aggravated. And I still felt love and peace for both of the dogs. And so for me to actually recognize how I felt and watch it change was pretty astounding. I was focused on what was going on inside of me, not what was happening outside in my environment. I think it would be an interesting exercise for you to try the same, because it was really enlightening for me. So give it a try. But I do want to end. I want to end by mentioning something that my boyfriend said to me today. And my boss called me at the end of today, and he said some pretty wonderful stuff to me as well. So what my boss said was very much in line with what I've said at the beginning of this episode regarding just how my purpose is here already, and he was really encouraging me to continue to pursue all of this that I'm enjoying doing, and to be reminded when I have a bad day how many people learn from my experiences, and how much joy. I don't know exactly the words that he said, but it's the feeling is what I remember that he gave me, and that I have a great way of spreading joy and all of that stuff, and so that was really really a nice way to end the day, because I was feeling pretty sad today, and so I wanted to share what my boyfriend said, because yesterday I had a coworker offer to clean out my office for me and bring the boxes to my house. And I really was grateful for that, because I went into the office to drop off my laptop and a doctor's note a couple weeks ago, and it was terrible. It was terrible for my head, and and I even wore my sunglasses and everything. So I was really happy that this coworker of mine offered to do this for me. So she dropped off the boxes, and last night she helped me make dinner, because that's not easy for me to do. We use we make every plate, like we get every plate delivered, the meals, but I have a hard time reading and following the directions. Reading the directions because it hurts my head, and then following the directions because I have a hard time focusing on each sentence, both visually and mentally. So it was nice to have somebody help me, because my boyfriend was out with a work function. Anyway, this is beside the point. Today, I was going through the boxes that she brought over, and I had a bunch of paperwork and stuff that I had, some project ideas right? I had ideas that I had put together and stuff. So I was going through them and figuring out, what I needed to shred and all of that stuff. And so my boyfriend was sitting there today, and I said, I feel like, I put so much uh effort into all of this. I put so much into all of this. I feel like everything I worked for, I'm just throwing in the trash. And he didn't say anything for a second. And then he said, "You're looking at this all wrong, Rachel." And he said, "Everything you worked for is right here." And I really appreciated that. That was the best thing anybody could have ever said to me at that very moment. And so I just want to leave you with that, because when I have something that is that profound for me, I want to make sure that I share it with others. So thanks for listening today, and I will talk to you tomorrow.